Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, yes, it appears at least from press reports that folks will need to quote unquote show their papers in order to dine in Thailand in October of 2021. And let's go ahead, and I got this from the Bangkok Post print edition. That's Bangkok Post, Monday, September 6, 2021. And we'll go ahead and put the online, version up just so people can see what I'm looking at here. But going ahead and quoting directly, starting October 1, only those who have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19 or have a negative antigen test result will be allowed to dine in at restaurants and seek out services deemed a high risk for virus transmission in quote-unquote dark red provinces where maximum COVID-19 restrictions apply. Quoting further, according to the Health Department's According to the Health Department's Director General, Suwanachai Watanaying Charonchai, the move is part of the government's push to allow businesses to reopen while the number of COVID-19 cases continues to increase. We'll get into that in a minute. Quoting further, in addition, they will be asked to show their vaccination certificate or a negative COVID-19 antigen test result taken no longer than a week prior before entering the premises. Former patients must show records which show that they have recovered. Yeah, for those who watch this channel, I'm sure you're well aware I find this news extremely troubling. A couple of things, and let me go ahead and preface any further commentary on this by saying, first of all, let's take note, this is from Bangkok Post, not casting aspersions on Bangkok Post or any of the press for that matter, but we have seen some really, sensational things said, sometimes in error. And I will cite one, I did a video on this, going back, it's been within the past 6 months. Going back, there was an article, it was front page print edition of the Bangkok Post as well, where it was presumed that, and it stated in the article, that it looked like everyone was going to have to get COVID insurance in Thailand. Well, it turned out that was entirely incorrect. The official being cited was noting it only for OA retirement visas. Now, am I saying that's what's happening here? No. Am I saying that there's anything wrong with mistakes? No, I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to cast blame. What I'm trying to do is hopefully calm everybody down because, this is supposedly the Health Department Director General. This is something they're saying, this is not the person that ultimately gets to make the decision, presumably. This would have to be ratified, this would have to be promulgated, presumably in the Royal Gazette for it to come through. Now, my personal opinion is I have serious issues with the legality of this. I know what part of the law they're going to base this on. We've done videos on this before, specifically with respect to the mask mandates and some of the other mandates. We've noted that within the provisions of that particular act, and again, I'm simply citing this for informational purposes. Look, an adjudication is what it is. I'm not saying what I think an adjudication would result in. But from the plain language, and I've discussed this with Thai attorneys here in our office, the plain language of both the English, which is not controlling, and the Thai, is that the government can promulgate certain rules from the emergency decree and from the Public Health Act, as amended back in 2015, to prevent certain things, not compel certain things. And I've gone into that previously. Now, getting into the difference between prevention and compulsion is not really the scope of this video. But first of all, I would say I've got serious legal questions about whether or not this can even be done, can even be promulgated. Secondly, it may not happen. We've heard a million different things, and things always change. I'm hoping they rethink this, because I think this is a terrible idea for a host of different reasons. Most notably, I think it's a massive violation of basic human rights. I think it's a massive violation of basic Thai freedoms that just are inherent to Thais, period. Now, a couple of things I do take a little solace in is, one, the deemed a high risk for virus transmission in, quote, dark red provinces where maximum COVID-19 restrictions apply. Well, presumably, if a province ceases to be dark red, perhaps this doesn't apply at that point. I might be being a little optimistic on that. The emergency decree, which was presumably temporary, was promulgated in March of 2020, and we're still dealing with it. So, how temporary would this be? I'm not sure. It's one of the reasons, frankly, I'm so concerned about it, because I don't really want to see us get stuck with these requirements, because it's just, in my opinion, I mean, I'm not even going to speak from a legal standpoint or as a lawyer. This is just awful. I mean, how can anyone think that this is in any way what a free society does? I'm sorry, and let me be clear. Let me be even more clear. I don't even blame particularly Thai anybody for this. To me, this is Western or international thinking being shoehorned into Thailand. And in my opinion, it's completely unwarranted based upon the circumstances. In my opinion, it's completely unwarranted based upon the quote-unquote threat. We've talked a lot on this channel about cost-benefit analysis. There was a great article by Glenn Greenwald, the journalist. It's out there. I think it's on Substack out there. And he was talking in an American context about what happened to cost-benefit analysis. Why have we just dismissed the notion of cost-benefit analyses? In the same, we haven't stopped driving cars because accidents happen. And as we've discussed on this channel before, I mean, there's an argument to be made in the car context for the same kind of restrictions if you think the logic is sound with respect to these truly draconian restrictions associated with just living your life here in Thailand with respect to this showing your papers to go eat in a restaurant. And I know that there are those out there, perhaps those mostly in the Western context, which will sort of say, oh, get over it, oh, you can't go eat at a restaurant if you don't comply. Well, too bad for you. Hey, Thailand is very different than the West in one key respect with respect to this overall issue. People don't eat in like they eat in the West. I'm not saying this for everybody, but in Thailand, we eat out a lot. I mean, be it street food, restaurants, whatever. People eat out. Thais socialize heavily in restaurants and eateries. This is a major and fundamental change to the way in which Thai people are going to live their lives on a very basic level, and it's being done for, ostensibly, for, quite frankly, a disease which, albeit is dangerous, is not an existential threat like we were worried about perhaps a little over a year ago. We know what this is, and we are handling it. And we can handle it, in my opinion, without resorting to measures which can only be described as Orwellian. I mean, honestly, you have to present paperwork to sit down and eat a meal. That to me is, again, one man's opinion, but to me it's ridiculous. Now, like I said before, maybe I'm overreacting a little bit. As I said, we've seen things reported in the mainstream press that have ultimately turned out to be incorrect. That could be the case here. At the same time, policies could change. People could take a look at this and perhaps see that this is not a road that we really want to go down. And finally, it may be a situation where, and I've done a video on this where I talk about, in the common law tradition, anything that comes along that changes things really, really scares me, because in the common law, you use precedent. So once you set a precedent, it's very hard to get over that. One thing I do love about Thailand, and I like about its legal system, albeit it's very foreign to me, or it was when I first started dealing with it and interacting with it, I've come to find it actually comforting in a way. And this is a good example of a situation where I find some comfort, is that they do rescind things when they are no longer needed, when they're no longer necessary. So when I see it said, in the places that are dark red zones, well, presumably, if Bangkok, for example, the district, the metro area, or any of the other Changwats that are the provinces that are dark red zones, if they cease to be dark red zones, presumably this will be rescinded and this won't be necessary. And in Thailand, I actually take a little bit of comfort in that, although I hate seeing any of this come online, because I truly am afraid it just becomes permanent. And I don't think there's good reason, and I don't think we really want to live in a world in which this kind of requirement is permanent for just undertaking basic human functions in a society. But that being stated, I do feel a little bit more comfortable with it in the Thai legal context, because there's not this precedent thing that kind of stubbornly gets people kind of caught up in the whole issue of precedent in a common law tradition. That said, overall, if you can't tell from the context of this video, I'm not real happy to see this happening, and I hope that cooler heads prevail.